Hello and welcome back to the Poet Speaks podcast. Today we have a very special guest. She's a spoken word poet, playwright, and screenwriter. She has competed in the Australian Poetry Slam competition in 2014 as a finalist, performed on Australia's Got Talent in 2016 as a semi-finalist, and is presented at TedxUWA and TedxNewtown. She has performed with notable artists, including Missy, Higgins, and L Fresh the Line, and her poetry and community arts projects have led her to tour globally and across her nation. In 2019, she premiered her debut theater show, Fully Sikh, with Barking Gecko Theater Company and Black Swan Theater Company. She's currently developing 3 film projects as well as an experimental film compilation to be exhibited in April 2022. Everyone, please welcome to the Poet Speaks podcast, Sukhjit Kaur Khalsa. Sukhjit, how are you?
Good. It's really awkward hearing your own bio because you don't know what to do with your face. It's like when you're performing live as well and people introduce you and everyone's just looking at you on side stage and you're like, oh, this is so awkward. It's like bragging.
But you know what? It's good because it's that, you need to brag sometimes, right? I mean, and it's not like you're saying it, someone else is saying it. So it feels good, right? I mean, I feel like it's good. But anyway, good stuff. Tell me, where are you at right now? Where's your location? Please tell us.
I'm in Perth, Western Australia right now. This is my hometown where I was born, where I grew up, went to school, briefly went to Melbourne, and then I came back and I've been back for the last couple of years.
Ooh, all right. So Australia. So I want you to know you are our first Australian guest. We have
God.
We have gone globally with the Poet Speaks podcast. We have done South Africa now, US, Japan, all over the place. I mean, really Nigeria. So the first person are you all down under or is that New Zealand? Which one's down under?
No, down under's up.
Yeah, down under's y'all.
Yeah.
Down under's you guys. Okay, perfect. Yes, our first Australian guest, and we're so happy to have you on today. So tell me a little bit about Australia. Tell us about the poetry scene. Obviously, reading your bio, I mean, you've done so much with spoken word. Tell us about the poetry scene growing up in Australia. What does that look like for those that don't know?
Well, I actually stumbled on spoken word poetry when I was probably 18 or 19, and I'd never heard of it prior. Like, I'd definitely written poetry in school or for fun, like as a kid, would write in my journal. But in terms of slam poetry or spoken word poetry, the exposure began a bit late in life. And even then, since I was 18 to now, I'm 27, Australia, when you walk down the street and you tell someone what you do in an Uber or on a bus, it's still not easy to explain. I feel like spoken word poetry hasn't hit as hard as in other countries. But I learned that in Melbourne, that was where the action was, and Sydney and Melbourne were the 2 big cities here. So Perth is on the other side of those 2 cities. It's a bit isolated. It's actually the most isolated city in the world. So
really, wow. Okay.
Exposure to culture and exposure to the arts and perhaps like progressive thinking it's not quite there yet, in my opinion. So I think a lot of my poetry is informed by living in that space and why the things I talk about are still considered controversial. Whereas if I did that same poem in Melbourne or even in the States or the UK, it doesn't have the same response because it's a very different climate and exposure. I think there's a lot more poets popping out from my community, the Sikh community, all over the world. Like, I'm just seeing, after Rupi Kaur, there's just like everyone's just bouncing out, and it's so cool to see like Instagram poets and everything. But in terms of Australia, young people still don't know a lot about it. However, the school curriculum, I go into schools, and as many poets do, to do workshops. And now I'm learning that in year 6, 7, and 8, they have started doing slam poetry as a part of their English. So that's showing change. Like, if I was in school and I got that would have been so cool. But Melbourne, that's where my sort of poetry community started. And it was a space where, 6 years ago, I was amazed that every night there was a different poetry event, and I couldn't believe it. I was just shocked, like blew my mind.
No, that's pretty So going back, I had no idea that Perth, smallest town, you said smallest town or city in the world.
No, most isolated.
Most isolated. Okay. So what does that, got you. So it's like kind of beyond a lot of these other the other cities in Australia. How did that affect you? I'm so curious now growing up. And obviously, you've mentioned many times before in your work, you're Sikh. That is your cultural background. What did that look like being a Sikh young girl, young kid growing out there in that very isolated town for you or city?
It felt like, now that I've like traveled to the States and UK and South Asia, it's made me realize that a lot of the generations before me in other countries is what I was going through growing up. If that makes sense, they were ahead in terms of generationally. So what that looks like is, we're still coming to terms with Australia. We don't have any Australian Sikh TV shows. We have zero we don't even have an Indian protagonist that we see on our screens in the entire country. So that's actually something I'm working towards, and we can talk about it later. But so when you're the first doing a lot of things, and there's a lot of first Sikh rappers, Australian rappers, first Sikh poets, first Sikh models, like that. It's when you're the first, it's hard because you don't have structure, you don't have role models, you don't know where you're going, you don't know the right path, and you're ultimately living in a really white world. So you internalize a lot of that. I internalize a lot of that, and I didn't even know what racism was until I was 20 and I moved to Melbourne, and people were talking to me like I'd never experienced before, in the sense that I was so comfortable, and I was like, oh, is this what it feels like to be semi-accepted or not on edge or not fighting all the time? So Perth is I still think it's quite conservative when it comes to race and feminism and sexuality and art. It's still like progressing, it's trying to, but I hated it. I hated growing up here.
Wow. Okay.
Look, Perth is also a beautiful place. So that's the hard thing. If you've got such a beautiful environment, the sky is perfect. There's hardly any pollution because of being so far away and being smaller population. The nature is stunning. The commute time is hardly anything. There's hardly any traffic compared to other places in the world. It's not a big city. So as growing up, I understand as a family, my parents love it. They really found home, and they clearly found a place that they felt comfortable in. But myself, I was a little black sheep in the family, and I didn't want to be here. And I remember as a primary school student, I would dream of being on stage. And I had this sort of fantasy of New York, because when you watch movies, Hollywood movies, and you're an Australian, you're kind of romanticizing America all the time. Everything you experience is American. So you have to see it as this place where all your dreams can come true. Whereas now as an adult, I'm like, well, I think my dreams can come true here. It's just industry needs to change.
Word. No, absolutely. So speaking of looking at that just such an extensive background, from where you're from and how that's clearly influenced so much of you. And, you talk about, you had those dreams as a kid. Okay, so let's get into Australia's Got Talent. That opportunity, what has that brought for you? Tell us first off, how did you get on the show? So everyone worldwide, listening to the podcast, everyone knows about the Got Talent series, America's Got Talent, Australia's Got Talent. That's such a big platform, and you were doing spoken word poetry. Tell us, how did that process even start for you, going from starting writing at 18? So I'm guessing, how old were you when you got on the show? It was pretty recent. So how old were you?
Yeah.
I started writing
20, so it was 2 years.
My God. So you started writing at 18, and at 20, you were on Australia's Got Talent, made it all the way to semifinals. Please tell us, how did that journey start? How did you get on the show? You found out about it. Please tell us.
So I'm sure as a kid, when you watch Australia's Got Talent or any reality shows, you assume what you're seeing on screen. I was very naive. I used to see what I saw on screen and thought, oh yeah, like people rock up, they audition, and then we get to see them all. However, it was like 6 months of auditions before I even got to the TV audition. So it was like 6 auditions, I think. And then like before that, like that you get an email, they scout you. It's not all just, you know, lining up and showing up. It was actually like they come to you, and they've probably seen a video of mine from like a Melbourne poetry thing, I feel. And then I got a message from like a talent agent, and they're like, hey, would you want to go on this show? And I laughed because I was like, what? Poetry? Like, that's such a weird thing for me to be putting on a straight. Like, I'm not a dancer, I'm not a singer, I don't have like some magic tricks. This is so weird. So I said no. And then they rung me like for 6 months, they kept ringing. Clearly they needed some diversity, let's be honest. And then they were like ringing and ringing, and I was like, okay. I wasn't in a very good place. Like I was in a bit of a, I just moved to Melbourne. I was young. I didn't have a lot like of, I don't know, like I wasn't confident in myself, and I was just overthinking everything. And I was like, no, I'm too scared. I don't want to do that. I'm not good enough, blah, blah, blah. And then I decided, my housemate was like, no, like, let's just do it. Who cares? Like if you audition and then they'd say no, it's okay, because at least you tried. And also, you know, maybe a good thing. Maybe your message will get out to a big audience. And I didn't even understand what a big audience meant, because I'm so used to, you know, small spoken word nights. Maybe the opera house was the biggest gig I'd done. Like it was like kind of, you know, I hadn't experienced television. And then I rocked up, and yeah, it was the most nervous I've ever been. And I was really skeptical, because I was, even though I was young, I was still aware of like the color of my skin, my community, and the community stuff really got to me. Like I was so scared that I was going to be skewed to look like some sort of joke, or you know, there was the form that you sign is like so terrible. Like, you know, they can do whatever they want to your story. So I did it. I took a big risk, and it could have ended up being pretty terrible. I'm very lucky that it ended up not being terrible. And what you saw on screen, like it was controversial for Australia at the time, and probably still is. And I'm surprised it made it to television. And then literally the night it aired, I didn't know if it would be going on television or not. So you all just find out like the rest of the public. So it was on, and I freaked out, which meant that I'd gone through to the next round, and I had to get my next poem ready. And then, my life changed. I quit my job, and I just started doing full-time art life. And within a month, I was touring the world. Like it all just happened so fast. And only now I've had the time to reflect and gone, whoa, did that even happen?
So that's amazing. I mean, so you literally just kind of went on, and you were just like, forget about it. Whatever happens, you know, you perform your poem. I mean, you make it all the way to the semifinals. So tell me what, you had mentioned the controversy. If you can tell us, what was the controversy that you ran into during the performance?
So Australia isn't very comfortable talking about race. And just a bit of context, the history of Australia, like many countries, is colonization, and the Indigenous people of this land, very recently, this isn't something that happened ages ago. This is just so recent in our history. And it still continues, the trauma and the genocide and the intergenerational stuff that goes on. And white people don't know how to deal with it. There's been some apologies, there's been some changes in trying to get some reconciliation. And the reason why I talk about this is because then when you add migration and people like me, like communities that are moving into Australia, it creates this space where it's just, there's these certain rules that you have to follow as a good migrant. And my family was really good at that. Me and my brother, I feel like we're perfectionists, we're overachievers because of that. And I don't think that's a good thing to, like, at a young age, to just feel like you have to work 200%. So the reason why I felt like the poem I chose to do basically turned our national anthem on its head and questioned, hey, there's this national anthem that is Advance Australia Fair, and it's about, you know, these beautiful, you know, planes and sharing and caring and all these things. But is that actually what's happening in reality? You know, do we want to share and care? Is there enough power for everyone? And, you know, a lot of people at the top will say, no, there isn't, but they're going to pretend there is. So I was scared, because if you talk about Australian, like Anzac Day, Australia Day, which is like Columbus Day, if you talk about like, or the national anthem, or Australian darlings, like, you know, people you can't touch, like things that you're just not allowed to touch. Talk about that, and especially if you talk about that on national television, on a very mainstream platform where the audience is very mainstream, they're consuming stuff that people like me wouldn't really want to be consuming. I was scared, because I'd been performing to the choir, I'd been performing to, like, you know, very inner city, hippie, lefty, vegan vibes. Very safe. It was very safe. It was very safe. So yeah, but I believe even then, and I still believe this now, in order to get the message out, I think I need to be mainstream. I think I need to be hitting bigger audiences in order to make change, because I think, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Even within our own communities of poetry and progressiveness, there's a lot of issues going on. But I think ultimately, you know, I felt like a sellout going on national television doing spoken word, but I also love that it exposed Australia to a new art form that they hadn't heard of. And also a way to communicate and hopefully get people to think about things with a different perspective.
1000%. I mean, because so like when you did that poem though, I mean, because like you said, you took the Australian national anthem, so that is huge. I mean, that's the country's song, right? You know what I mean? That's their like declaration of independence, right? It's such a huge thing. Turned it on its head and talked about the vast realities, you know, Indigenous, Black, Brown peoples are facing, right, that are marginalized. But you know what? Controversial, but you received like worldwide, people were like, oh my goodness, yep, this woman's amazing. Like, she's really speaking the truth of what's really happening. When that hits you, because it's like spoken word, like you said, it's so like, it's not big in Australia per se, right? And it's such an underrated art form that not a lot of people are like necessarily like jumping onto, but there are so many poets, right? When that kind of recognition for you came from that poem, I mean, like you had like celebrities retweeting all that stuff. How was that? I mean, was that just a wave of like, oh my God, yo, this is powerful? Like, how did you react to that? All that newfound attention?
I think it was really hard, because I think when you're receiving attention, you're receiving like good attention and affirmations, but then on the side of that, you're also receiving heaps of negative stuff, like, you know, the trolls, the haters. And I hadn't experienced that before. So I think I was like quite confronted, and not just confronted by what they were saying, but also the volume and the level it was coming at from all angles. So it was like, it was really overwhelming, and I got a little caught up in that. And I think, you know, I remember with Australia's Got Talent, they made us like do some social media training. So they got us to like open up a Facebook page and like different accounts for things, and that like we had to maintain them. And I was so bad. Like, I was really bad at creating content and making sure I was out there. And I also feel like, you know, as a girl, I was like, oh, no one will like this post article, but they'll like it if I put a selfie, because apparently the algorithm will like get more likes with that. So I was just learning all that stuff. And this is so long ago. This is like not even the time now where I don't even understand what's going on now with social media. But I didn't like, now that I've had a break from not putting myself out there and not being online and not posting selfies, I've realized that I've really changed as like my, like, I don't know, it's like a form of meditation. Like my brain is quieter. It used to be very loud, and my brain and my mind and my body, like just everything, I think everything, this is going to sound really hippie, but everything really manifested. And I've got a lot of health issues now. So now I'm just dealing with literally the recovery of years being this weird one-hit wonder.
No, not one-hit wonder. So tell me, I remember because earlier you had stated afterwards you had 1 month after. Well, first off, how did you feel not winning? Do you feel, I mean, like, did you feel slighted just a bit? I mean, like,
well, that's a
semifinals.
really good, I was given some advice. I don't know if it was from a lawyer or someone else. They basically said, don't win the show. Because I mean, I don't know how you can control that, but they were like, don't win because you'll be locked into a contract and you won't be allowed to work. So even during the time I was on Australia's Got Talent, I wasn't allowed to work as a performer, and you weren't paid to go on the show. So imagine that, you're not really earning anything. And when gigs are coming through, you can't do them because you're locked in to be on this show. So in terms of business decision, it would have been great to get $250,000, but it came with the cost. And it came with the cost of, even now, 10 years later, like I'm not 10 years later, but 10 years of performing, I've learned I feel physically sick when I'm owned by someone, and I feel much more free and myself when I'm in control. So I think it would have been interesting to win at that time, but maybe it would have changed me as a person in terms of like being owned by agents and like, I don't know, Sony and having deals and like, and honestly, those shows, like if you study them, they're in Australia, they're really trying to groom like blonde white kids who are young and have a sad story to kind of like win a show and then take them to like a soap opera to make them into actors. Whether they're good or not, it doesn't matter. But that's kind of like the business. I've seen that over the years as a kid, like watching these shows. So I don't look like a blonde white actor for one of these beachy shows that shows Australia's a great place. So I think I was surprised that like it was controversial enough to have me there. But I've found even recently I was nominated and a finalist for like our Australian of the Year awards.
Congrats.
Thank you. But the thing is, like, I rocked up to the awards night and everyone's been asking me, oh, wow, must be so exciting, must be so cool. And I'm like, you know what? These things, they might look cool on the outside, but when you're on in the inside and you're actually there, it makes you feel a little bit weird that like you're okay enough if you're smiling and doing the right things as a brown girl. But as soon as you cross a boundary and it makes people really uncomfortable, then you're not allowed in the club. So I've been reflecting on that in the last couple of years. Like I'm enough when people don't know me and they're like, oh, she's so smiley and friendly, you know, so harmless. And then I actually say what I feel, what I really feel deep down and how I'm really feeling. And people don't know how to respond. So that's me in a nutshell. And I feel like these shows, yes, I'm really glad I got exposure. My career I'm really thankful that I got to do this, you know, journey and talk to lots of people. And but I also think it's deeper than that. It's more nuanced than that. There's a lot more going on. There's a big game going on. And I'm just, you know, there were times on the show that, you know, I'm a hairy girl as a Sikh woman and I've got body hair. And I was really scared to put my body hair on TV because I knew what that would do. And they were pushing with a lot of things and I didn't like how I was going to be represented. And I think that they learned that I wasn't going to be the funny Indian that they could, or the ugly Betty that they could make fun of, because there's archetypes. And I think that he ended up having to get some Indian dude who does like Elvis impersonations or something, because they needed a funny migrant. They needed the joke. They needed the jester. And I just didn't want to be that. Yeah.
Absolutely. No. Oh my goodness. I mean, you dropped a lot of knowledge there. I mean, I think a lot of people, you know, you had said something, you had said, on the outside looking in, you know, people look at that experience, people look at shows like that and be like, oh my God, like, yo, once in a life, oh, I can't believe you're doing that. But then it's such a different thing on the inside, especially let's say being a brown person, a Black person, a woman, you know what I mean? Whatever your marginalized identity is, you know, the niche part of it, like, it's like you can't escape that almost, like no matter where you go, that people don't let you escape that. Well, I'm curious, moving on from that, like you said, okay, so like you know, after the show had happened, you know, you went on tour, just like a whirlwind, everything hitting you at once. What became for you, what kind of became your poet identity? We talked a little bit about that with the show. They wanted to, you saw ways in which, okay, maybe they're trying to contract me, box me into this. After the show, you know, when you were free to kind of just be you at that point, at least I think, were you free to be you to kind of craft your writer identity, you know, bringing in, you know, whatever indigenous, your Sikh culture background into your writing? Did you feel free at that point after the show to be like, okay, I'm going in, I'm going to represent who I truly want to represent, write about everything I want to write about?
I feel like two things were going on while I was going on tour and doing lots of poetry and getting lots of cool opportunities. I was also figuring out not just who my writer identity was, but who I was, because I'd moved out of home.
Yeah.
I hadn't had the chance to figure out a lot of things. So I was trying to do it all at the same time. And it was a bit messy. Like, you know, the first sort of opportunities that started coming, I remember the first news content that started interviewing was like Indian newspapers from India. And I was really shocked. I didn't, because
wow.
Like the episode aired and I was going, how did they access that so quickly? That's amazing. Like, how did India experience that? Like, yes, I'm Indian, but I'm not brought up there. I don't have the same cultural stuff going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the first sort of thing that was hit, and people really latched onto this racism thing. They latched onto like, and for their own reasons. So India latched onto it because they wanted to, you know, they have their own tensions with Australia. So they were like, you know, doing different angles. And then my community, the Sikh community, is the one, like, I think it was someone in America and someone in Canada first contacted me. And then we made a tour happen with the UK as well. Wow. So that tour suddenly turned into the Sikh poster child. And I was really surprised because I was like, oh, but why would you want some random girl from Perth? There's probably, like, you have a bigger population, you have much more, you know, bigger Sikh community there everywhere than here. I'm surprised that they wanted someone like me to come to them and go to their like youth camps and summer camps and do workshops and perform, and do different programs like that. So without me really intentionally doing anything about it, I don't think I really truly had the freedom to be who I was, because within my community, I still had conservative things I needed to be really aware of, like how I dressed, how I talked, how, you know, my role as a young woman in that community, and who people thought I was and who I knew I actually was really interesting. And then also, you know, just the BS that I would have dealt during that, and the inter-community like conflict stuff and getting amongst that at a very young age, once again, was just really confusing. Only now do I feel like my content and my writing is currently trying to not be the Sikh educator. I'm currently trying to not be centering white audiences as my everything and centering white characters or just whiteness, like just trying to go, hang on, if I keep for like 10 years, I'm a broken record and I'm constantly talking about Sikhs and how we're not terrorists and please don't kill us. Like, it's like constantly doing this dance. And then you're like, that was good for that time, but now I want to move on to other stuff. And I don't think that means that I'll ever not be a Sikh, because obviously I can't undo that. That's just something I can't change about myself. That's just who I am, and everything I do will automatically be Sikh. But I guess the difference is maybe I don't want to be boxed into like only talking about Sikh stuff, or you know, maybe there's topics that I'm yet to explore that I haven't been comfortable enough to explore, because I don't know, because of the opportunities that were present.
Yeah. Oh man. No, that's a very great, thoughtful answer. It's so interesting looking at how, it seems your perspective has changed so much from being thrust into the spotlight with Australia's Got Talent to where you're at now. It seems like almost like a 180 flip in terms of your perspective on what this whole situation is, your whole situation of being a spoken word artist. I'm curious now. Okay, so like as for you, obviously, you're talking about you don't want to be that boxed in, speaking only about Sikh issues, etc. For you, where do you find, the inspiration to write now these days for you? Where is that coming from? Is it still very much rooted in, your tradition, your heritage? Or are you now kind of seeking out, a different inspiration, different meaning in terms of your spoken word?
I think as a Sikh, like growing up in the household that I did grow up, social justice and like being this warrior was like kind of ingrained in our house.
Wow.
So so constantly advocating, whatever that means to anyone, they can interpret that whatever they like. Like it's not just advocating for your rights and Sikh rights and who you are, but actually going out there and getting in trouble and being a rebel. Like I think that has been a big part of life. And I think that's probably why I've chosen art to do that. I did a politics degree. I thought I was going to be a politician. I wanted to be the Prime Minister of Australia when I was a kid. I learned very quickly that I'm so shit at filtering, and people can tell when I'm lying so easily that I would be so bad as a politician. So that's why I chose, and I was very impatient. I'm still impatient. Like I can't wait 20 years for change to happen, 50 years for change to happen. I'm always like, pick up my suitcase. I want to do this myself because I cannot wait any longer. So there's this sort of attitude that I grew up with. And that so it's not necessarily the topics I want to talk about are Sikh. I think it's my lens is Sikh, but the stuff that makes me, that gives me that fire is still shit that makes me angry. I think it's still like, and being back in my hometown in Perth and feeling like nothing has changed obviously fuels so much content. Like now, like I'm transferring a lot of those poetry skills and trying to put them into theatre writing and TV writing and really trying to figure out ways to bridge those gaps. Because I think that as a writer, it's easy to go, like, I mean, you go through phases. Like I was a solo performer for so long that I just started to get lonely, and I was like, oh, I want to collaborate. I want to be, with other people in the room and not be alone all the time. Because I think that you can get tunnel vision and you start to get really egotistical. Honestly, as a spoken word artist, there's so much ego involved that I felt like it was just the ego was getting too high. And I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I need to find other ways to express this stuff. I still work in schools. I still do workshops. I still love being in the poetry world in terms of giving, but I don't think I like the spotlight anymore. I think I've become a bit more anxious about the spotlight. And I wrote a theatre show for kids 2 years ago, and it was about growing up in Perth, and I did it all in poetry. So that was a really nice challenge on how to write poetry for like 75 minutes rather than a 5-minute poem, getting one message across. This theatre show was a whole art, like taking the audience on a journey. It was just like a really challenging and interesting way to use my poetry skills. And now I want to like write TV about poets, with with poetry, like whatever that looks like. I think, that's where I'm at.
That's amazing. I love how, again, I love your self-reflection. You said something really, really like, something I say controversial. You said spoken word artist ego. Man, if that's not the truth, because it's very true though. You know what I mean? Because it's an art form where literally it's only you and the mic. People have to listen to you. you're forcing people to listen to you. You know what I mean? Like, it can be used for good responsibility, but also very much evil. You know what I mean? Using your voice to, tell stories, command, all those things. So I love the honesty with that. Cause yeah, it definitely is, it definitely is. There's an aspect of it where it is like, if you're not really realizing it, maybe you're not doing it for the good or bad reasons, if it's like self-gratifying reasons to just, hear yourself talk on stage. So that's a good point. That's a good point. Poets and spoken word artists, we definitely have, have that in us for sure. But so, you talked so much about having ideas for poetry, working with poets, poetry with children, writing these plays, for you, what do you think ultimately people can take away from spoken word?
This is such a good question because I'm literally writing a show for young people, and it's about expression. Because the biggest thing, my favorite thing to do is when I walk into a classroom, sometimes it's an all boys school or it's a school where expression isn't really a thing, which is a lot of young people going through that.
Facts, yeah.
I was one of those people. And now I overexpress for that reason. I overcompensate. And even if someone hates poetry, hates English, hates literature and reading and performing, I just hope that when I do a workshop, that they learn how to communicate. Because I always talk about how that communication, like the spoken word journey I've been on, if I hadn't gone on that, I would not have been able to communicate in my personal life. There has been so many, literally, sometimes it's a daily problem. Like I'll have conflict in my life. I'll have, work situations. I'll have just situations on the street, like with strangers, and building the confidence to communicate in a way that is articulate and gets your point across, that isn't attacking and is actually bringing someone in. I'm not saying there's always room for anger. Like I'm a very angry person, don't get me wrong. But how to, basically it's a strategy. How do I get this person to understand what I'm trying to say? If more young people in school at a primary school age get that skill, I believe that when they get to their adult years and they get into relationships and they have their families of their own, I feel like that is just such a life skill that no one can teach. No one teaches it. And it can solve so many problems, I believe, in this world. I think just good communication and connecting like your vulnerability and connecting your heart self to other hearts. Like, I think there is some idealism in there. Like, I think there is still like, I still do believe like there's a romantic part of me that believes that like, if I had 10 minutes with the Prime Minister and I could perform a poem, I'd love to be face to face. There's something really beautiful. I know with COVID, it's a bit hard now, but there's something really important for me about eye contact. Yeah. And if I can't get that, like with the theatre show, it was the first time where I had to learn how to have a black sort of stage, like where you look out and you can't see anything, because that's just how like theatre does it. Whereas I said, can I please get the lights just so I can see? Because I need to see this audience. I need to get to know them. And I need to connect. Because then it's not a two-way relationship. Then it's just me performing at someone, and that's boring. I don't want to talk at people. I think that I want to connect. And that's why I still believe, even if I'm not performing as much anymore, I will still continue to hopefully bring that into my life through like workshops or young people or whatever that is, because I just really believe that can really help people, just really help everything.
Absolutely. No, that's a very thoughtful answer. I love that. Just teaching people, like you said, like that skill, of communication. It's truly not taught. Like, I think so many people, as you go into adulthood, people still lack that. I mean, in so many levels, on every level. So I think, I think that's such a powerful thing to say, that spoken word can really teach how to communicate well, a skill that is so needed in life and everything. Okay, so final question before we wrap up. Why do you need to get your words out?
I can't imagine, like, sometimes this is going to be a roundabout way to answer your question, but sometimes people ask, can you see yourself like changing careers or doing something else? And I'm like, no, I think once you start, I think as a kid, I didn't know I was going to be an artist, but I feel like when I look back at the path that I've taken, it's like so obvious. If someone was watching me, they'd be like, oh yeah, it's so obvious you're going to be an artist, and it's so obvious you're going to do this for the rest of your life. And I think that's why the art forms keep changing. And I feel like the words kind of stay the same in terms of the heart, the authenticity, the honesty. Honesty is so important for me, as hard as it is for me and the audience. I have to always remember that it's also hard for an audience to listen to me, because it's it can be a lot. But I think the reason why I need to get my words out is, you know, the ancestors, the Sikh, like the founder of Sikhism, if you want to call it ism, you know, he created this lifestyle choice, and he was similar to Jesus in that he was a rebel, and he'd like tour around. I call him like a touring rap artist, and he'd travel around and he'd like actually share this message through poetry. And I found that it really resonates with me. There's a lot of things that don't resonate with me when it comes to my culture, but there's certain things that really resonate with me. And I think that's what I hope that I can continue doing. And also more young people, more any people can just pass on that sort of message of speaking your truth, setting yourself free. And you'd never know, like when I like talk to someone who's feeling really nervous about performing, I always tell them, you never know like who you're going to inspire, because your audience, like, you don't know what type of day they're having. You don't know what's going on in their lives. And I experience it as an audience member. Sometimes I'll listen to someone speak, whether it's poetry or whatever type of performance, and I'll go up to them and I'll be like, did you know that I was having the lowest day that I've had in so long? And you just reminded me something. And it's just that acknowledgement, like, oh my God, like we all need that awesome food to kind of like keep us going. And that for me, like words. Also, I'm a bad dancer and a bad singer. So like the words is all I've got right now. So
she said she's a bad dancer and a bad singer, so poetry's all she has. Now, really, that's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much. I think that's such a perfect way to wrap up. So as we're ending, I mean, geez, this has been such a great conversation. You've taken us into your past, what poetry is meaning to you these days, and what you're doing now. Let's see, what is 2022 looking like for you? What's the rest of the year looking like for you? You had mentioned some stuff, and also where can we find you on socials to find out all information about your upcoming work?
So you can always Google my name, Sukhjit, and there'll be a Facebook page that you can follow. I apologize in advance that I've been very bad at admin, and I haven't been keeping everyone updated on what's going on, but when things do get out there, I definitely will post them. I'm currently, 2022 looks like developing more TV series for YA audiences, for young adults, developing a rom-com, which I'm really excited about, which will be like Indigenous and Indian sort of love story, because that's a thing that I haven't really seen before. And I'm also, you know, trying to get out there with like, I've got a body hair documentary that I'm currently developing. And I hope that, you know, Netflix come at me, you know, hopefully it'll be there soon. And I'm really enjoying being challenged. And this is coming back to our ego chat. It's really good to learn what you're not good at and what you need to work on. So this year I'm upskilling myself as a storyteller in a different format. So that's me.
That's what's up. All right, everyone, please go check out Sukhjit's. All her info will be in the YouTube description box below. Sukhjit, thank you so much for being on the Poet Speaks podcast today.
Thank you so much. It was so good talking.
Absolutely. So everyone, please like, comment, subscribe, tell this podcast to everyone you know, your friends, your friends' friends, your parents' friends, all that good stuff. Like I said, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you again to our guest, Sukhjit. All right, everyone, this is the Poet Speaks podcast, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.